Today I'll discuss ode. What is an ode? The word ode comes from the Greek word "aegein", which means to sing or to chant. Odes are often ceremonial and formal in tone. It is an elaborately structured poem praising or glorifying an event or individual, describing nature intellectually as well as emotionally. Greek odes were originally poetic pieces performed with musical accompaniment. As time passed, as time passed on, they gradually became known as personal lyric compositions, whether sung with or without musical instruments, or merely recited always with accompaniment. The primary instruments used were the aulos and the lyre. The latter was the most revered instrument to the ancient Greeks. A classic ode is structured in three major parts: the strophe, antistrophe, and the epochs. The strophe is a poetic form. The strophe is a poetic form originally referring to the first part of the ode in ancient Greek. The strophe usually consists of two or more lines repeated as a unit. In modern usage, the term strophe can refer to any group of verses that form a distinct unit within a poem. It is sung by the chorus from east to west. Strophe has been extended to also mean a structural division of a poem containing stanzas of varying line length. The antistrophe. An antistrophe is the second part of an ode and is meant to mirror the opening section, called the strophe. Originally, when the ode form was sung by choruses in ancient Greece, the strophe would be performed by moving from east to west. The antistrophe, which mirrored and reversed the strophe, was then performed by moving from west to east. Thus, the antistrophe was an act of balancing and reacting to the strophe. It was a very important part of the ode form of ancient Greece, which was in turn an extremely important form of literature that celebrated athletic victories and praised noble things and people. The antistrophe wasn't just the second stanza or part, it often was written in a distinct tone and moved from the first part so as to balance the emotional effects of the opening part or strophe. It was an embodiment of the Greek quest for balance and aesthetic perfection. The epode. This section or stanza typically has a distinct meter and length from the strophe and antistrophe and serves to summarize or conclude the ideas of the ode. The English Romantic poets wrote many odes, all of which explored intense emotions. While Romantic odes deviate in form and meter from the traditional Greek odes, they all tend to follow some kind of traditional verse structure. For example, Percy Bysshe Shelley's "Ode to the West Wind", believed to have been written in response to the loss of his son, is written in iambic pentameter. Types of odes. In ancient Greece poetry, there were three types of odes: Pindaric, Horatian, and irregular. Not surprisingly, the Pindaric Ode is named after the Greek poet Pindar, and the Horatian Ode is named after the Roman poet Horace. What is Pindaric Ode? Pindar is often credited Pindar is often credited with creating the ode form. This original form of the ode contained the formal opening of the strophe, the mirroring stanza called the antistrophe, which has the same meter and length of the strophe, and the concluding echo, which has a different meter and length than the previous two sections. These ode examples were originally performed by a chorus and accompanied by dancers and instruments such as the aulos and lyre. Pindar's odes were delivered to boys and young men who triumphed in the Greek classical games and were performed with song and dance. A Greek chorus would move to one side of the stage to deliver the strophe, shift to the other side of the stage for the antistrophe, then deliver the echo from center stage. Pindaric odes experienced a revival in the 1550s in France and derived from poetic imitations of Pindar's style. Horatian ode. They are also known as homostrophic ode. Each stanza in the Horatian ode form has the same meter, rhyme scheme, and length. This is not the only difference from Pindaric ode. Horace broke away from the strict structure of the Pindaric ode and focused on more personal, informal topics. Horatian odes were revived during the Renaissance but were not meant for public performances. Horatian odes are less formal and more often reflections on love, friendship, and poetry itself. Irregular ode. Irregular odes use rhyme scheme and meter, but do not have the same stanzaic structure as either the Pindaric or Horatian odes. There is no correspondence between the different parts as there is in the other two forms, and the rhyme scheme requires lines only to rhyme somewhere and not in a particular place. Significance of odes in literature. What is the significance of odes in literature? The ode has held an elevated position in the history of literature. Pindaric odes were often written and performed to celebrate athletic victories, while much later Romantic poets wrote odes in English to celebrate the strongest sentiments and deepest admirations. The ode suited both of these time periods well due to the love of drama in both ancient Greece and the Romantic period at the end of the 18th century and into the 19th century. The first known odes written in English were the Epithalamion and Prothalamion by Edmund Spenser, but the form really took off with the irregular odes of Abraham Cowley. Romantic poets William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, and Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote the most famous examples of odes in the English language. Examples of odes in literature. Now, this is an example from Edmund Spenser's Epithalamion. Epithalamion is one of the first two examples of ode in the English language. Coming from Elizabeth, England, stanza of Spencer's ode reveals the large themes that he will be dealing with in his poem. There is also the allusion to the legendary Greek musician and poet Orpheus, which further ties Spenser's poetic form to its origin in ancient Greece. Three learned sisters, which have oftentimes been to me aiding others to adorn, whom we thought worthy of your graceful rhyme, that even the greatest did not greatly scorn. To hear their names sung in your simple lays, but joyed in their praise, and when ye list your own mishaps to mourn, which death or love or fortune's wreck did raise, your string could soon to saddle tenor turn, and teach the woods and waters to lament your doleful bereavement. No, this is an example of Pindari ode on intimations of immortality from recollections of early childhood by William Wordsworth. There was a time when meadow, grove and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it had been of yore, turn wheresoever I may, by night or day. The things which I have seen, I can now seen, I now can see no more. Horatian Ode. This is an example from John Keats' Ode to Nightingale. One of the most famous masters of the Horatian Ode was John Keats. Another English Romantic poet, Keats wrote odes that feature beautiful, lush imagery and a deep exploration of the poet's own emotions. Keats' odes that are much studied and loved today include "Ode on a Grecian Urn to Autumn" and "Ode to Nightingale", the first stanza of which is presented here. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the brains. 1 minute passed, and little words had sung. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light winged, bearest the trees in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full throated ease. Irregular ode. Irregular ode. This is an example from uh, Ode to the Confederate Dead by Ellen Page. Irregular odes. They are also known as the Cowleyan ode, after English poet Abraham Cowley. The irregular ode relaxes the structure of the ode poem even further. American poet Ellen Tate's "Ode to the Confederate Dead", written in 1928, is an example of an irregular ode. There is an excerpt: row after row, with strict impunity, the headstones yield their names to the elements. The wind whirls without recollection, and the riven troughs the splayed leaves. Pile up of nature the casual cyclamen to the seasonal eternity of death, then driven by the fierce scrutiny, of heaven to the election in the vast breath, they sow the rumor of mortality. Another example of irregular ode is Ode on a Grecian Urn by John Keats. John Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn is perhaps the most well-known ode ever written, though more so in name than in content perhaps. This is an example of an irregular ode that is rhymed throughout, but it is not as strict as other rhyme forms. Keats wrote this poem to glorify the virtues of classical Greek art. Therefore, no other poetic form is as fitting as the ode, which is an example of classical Greek art itself. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, Sylvan stories which past thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than a rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shade of deities or mortals or of both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens love? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild escape? Thank you.